Okay, so this is going to be video two of our introduction. I was talking about the basic table of contents, the 13 chapters of this course that we didn't do in the previous video. So we're just going to make a quick video, define a few things. It is a quick video about the chapters of this course, the 13 chapters, and we're simply going to define the table of contents, the 13 chapters in this video. You can see that I've written them out right here. So, uh, we want to kind of have something of substance. Personally, there's a few things that I will say many, many times along the way. Um, this is kind of one of them, and that's just that we all learn through example. But there is a lot of math, like we are discussing, and sometimes there's very little math. It's more like diagrams and graphs and things of that nature, but it's still a conceptual understanding. But anyways, it doesn't matter if it's math or econ or what it is. Definitions never meant a whole lot to me. The definitions I find very annoying. And personally, I learn a lot better just through example. So if we kind of, if we quickly define, the basic heading, if we kind of, what do we call it? If we basically define the general theme behind each chapter, kind of give a brief definition or description, that's what we're going to do here. And I think that's fine. But along the way, jumping into each chapter, learning the concepts and going through the actual problem sets, those are a lot more important than what we do here. What we do here is simply kind of briefly define each one. So chapter one, we are currently doing right now. That's just the introductory videos. It's going to go into a few other things. Each one of these here, of course, has numerous bullet points. They're not bullet points, but there are many, many subject matters within each of the chapters. So we don't outline that here. It would take too long. We learn that as we go along. But there's a few things tied in the intro that we are going to do next. Yeah. But this is the series of introductory videos here. So two is the math review. In the math review, chapter two, we will define the basic prerequisites for the course mathematically, and we'll go through a few problem sets and things like that. Chapter three is going to be production choices. So chapter three, production choices. Chapter four, consumption choices. So chapter three, production choices, can be defined the set of choices society faces for the combinations of goods and services it can produce, uh, given the resources available. I guess kind of what we're doing, what we produce, given what we have, and things like that. But then chapter four, consumption choices, the study of how people decide to spend their money based on their individual preferences and budget constraints. So, chapter three, chapter four, already we see what I'm talking about. Citing a definition doesn't mean very much. We understand a whole lot better, much, much more in depth, what this means when we jump in. But right now, we're just going to briefly define. So chapter five, of course, we really like market equilibrium. It's not too hard to understand. It can always be, much harder than this, but when we think market equilibrium, of course, we think of the basic introductory supply and demand curve. So the supply and demand curve can kind of illustrate market equilibrium. I mean, it does exactly illustrate market equilibrium, but a state in which market supply and demand balance each other, and as a result, price becomes stable. So we kind of have the table of contents here. Specifically, why would I put the supply and demand curve right there? It is specifically to illustrate number five, market equilibrium. Yes. So market equilibrium is all about that point right there. Yes, where there is a equilibrium between supply and demand. That's what that chapter is going to be all about there. So okay, so chapter six is monopolies. I think we all basically understand what monopolies are. Kind of a technical definition, a monopoly is a market structure where a single seller or producer assumes a dominant position in an industry or sector. There's always like a fancy way to say it, but um, if one company controls the entire industry or if they control most of it, then it's more of a monopoly. But we do have an entire chapter on that. So price discrimination is chapter 7. Price discrimination is a selling strategy that charges customers different prices for the same product or service based on what the seller thinks they can get the customer to agree to. So it can be a little bit unfair there. Okay, so chapter 8 is uncertainty. Economic uncertainty refers to a situation in which the future economic environment is difficult to predict and there's a high degree of risk or unknowns involved. So we do kind of see, we're just going through the some of the kind of technical definitions that they might say in the book or online or something. These are correct definitions that are recognized. Uh, if we don't understand something really in terms of math, it's always by a diagram or graph. So all of these, of course, are more technically proficient when it's not a visual aid, but they do have specific graphical understandings to these, which we'll do when we get into the class. So, so we do have two chapters on game theory. Chapter 9 is game theory part 1. Chapter 10 is game theory part 2. And we don't really know what game theory is. If we've never had econ before, we wouldn't know. We can probably kind of guess. I don't know if it's like manipulative or something, but between people or between businesses, companies, industries. But maybe it's just kind of a strategic way of doing things. But game theory is the study of strategic interactions among economic agents. Then it's kind of like, what is an economic agent? Game theory studies decision making in situations where different players interact and their outcomes depend on each other's choices. So we have to study this a lot better to understand what these definitions mean. I don't so much like the definitions, but an economic agent are organizations or individuals that impact the economy by their actions. So all of us are economic agents, or all of us at companies. Anybody involved in the game in game theory is going to be an economic agent. And then they say things like that. Game theory is a study of strategic interactions among economic agents. So they just kind of do a really fancy definition for the guess that we kind of already had there. Yeah. So chapter 11 is going to be asymmetric information is a term that refers to when one party in a transaction is in possession of more information than another. So not too complicated. As we kind of go further along, 12 incentives and contracts in chapter 13, externalities in public goods. So the definitions get kind of a little hard to state. When I state the definition, we want to kind of have some basic understanding of what the definition is, what we of course do, but when we kind of get to the end of the class here, I find it a little bit hard to define. So we just have to jump into those chapters. But for the most part, we have stated chapters 1 through 13 is going to be the entire course, microeconomics for business. And there's many, many concepts in there. But once we go through all of them, chapter 1 through 13, it will be a comprehensive, we will have studied all the basic concepts in a business course and micro econ for business, but we will have very thoroughly gone through the subject matter of a full course.